A phrase that we heard a lot is a leader's responsible for everything their unit does and fails to do. Well, guess what? If they're on your team and they're failing to do something, that's just as much on you.
Yeah, man.
And so it goes back to that idea of the teamwork and that standards high. And there's no ability as a leader to say, oh, well, they'll have to figure that out. No, it's your problem. This is Craig and Andrew, two Ranger qualified Army officers with MBAs, here to help you improve your business through leadership.
Each week, we'll deliver easy lessons from the battlefield to the boardroom on how to improve team performance. If you're a leader or want to be, this is the place for you.
Welcome to the Cohort.
Disclaimer, the views in this podcast are those of the authors alone and do not represent the views of the Department of Defense or the U.S. Army.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome back.
Hey, how's everybody?
Hope everybody's doing well. This morning, I think we're going to talk about our first cohort. Me and Andrew go back a long ways, all the way back to our time at Auburn and ROTC.
It's been over 2 decades now, Craig. You realize that? Over 2 decades we've known each other.
I had not realized that. It's interesting that we have a background where our leadership journey had a key or critical piece right there at the beginning. Those 4 years of ROTC training before going off as commissioned officers, I think was instrumental in both our career and our journey as leaders.
Yeah, Craig. How did we become who we are, Craig? That's the topic of the day.
Yeah, I feel like and we've talked a little bit in the past of the idea of the nature versus nurture of where not just ourselves, but our cohort, our classmates, were we all predispositioned to what we became in terms of leadership styles and skills, or how much impact were the cadre there early on? Because it was 4 years of that to where on a regular basis, we were exposed to these ideas of leadership and best practices. And I think that is a big piece of how I got to my leadership style.
Yeah. Well, so, it's almost the tale of two leadership lessons for our experience, right? To set the baseline, right? Like, our cohort started the year after 9/11, right? So we were kind of already, a certain level of volunteer, right?
Yeah.
And the wars were kicking off in Iraq and Afghanistan. So we were already predisposed, I guess, to get to your nature point for this kind of thing. But so was everybody else in ROTC across the nation at the same time. So how did we become who we are? Well, so our first 2 years in ROTC, we had one professor of military science. And in our second 2 years, we had a different one, just by nature of the way the Army rotates people out of things. And I think that kind of dissecting that will really tell us a lot about how we became who we are, because there was 11 or 13 of us that graduated together.
Yeah, it was right around there. I'd have to sit down and try to list it out. Again, those 2 decades that you brought up.
2 decades might erase some of that. But so ROTC, it's very competitive to get what's called the maneuver branches, so infantry, armor, field artillery. And to be commissioned at the time is competitive to be even commissioned active duty, because as a reserve officer training corps, you're actually commissioned in the reserves. So you have to compete for an active duty slot. There was most of the cohort, over 50% probably got maneuver branches and active duty.
Yeah.
And
I think the individuals that did go National Guard or Reserve, I think that was at their request. They had some were the simultaneous membership program where they were actually already in the Guard during college. And so there were some extenuating circumstances that they wanted that career path. But again, I think when we look at who wanted to go active duty to a combat arms branch, it was, and I didn't realize it until after commissioning and talking with others, how unique that was.
Yeah.
because we knew we performed well at joint exercises and going around doing training with other schools, but we didn't, at least I did not realize that having that many individuals pursuing those slots.
Yeah. So part of it, we spend a lot of time together, which is somewhat unique to military service, right? You develop relationships with each other because of the time you spend together. But it wasn't just that, I don't feel like, because the first 2 years we were kind of learning the basics as freshmen and sophomores. This is how you tie your boots. This is what a compass and how it works. That kind of, not, it's a bit pejorative, but it was that kind of stuff, right? We got exposed to some leadership, and we were listening. The juniors and the seniors were in leadership roles kind of over, so we're observing leaders very directly, people that were learning how to be leaders. But we didn't really solidify as a cohort just yet. I don't feel like in the first couple of years. Like I said, we had one PMS then. It was a traditional Army, I'll say, right? He had a regular branch. He was armor officer, I believe. So he kind of taught us the traditional Army line, right, Craig? Which is like, the standards, discipline, and,
Yeah.
work hard and plan properly, that kind of thing, which is all well and good and necessary.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think it was a good baseline for us, especially those years of, those first 2 years, you're doing some small leadership tasks. You may be teaching a class on something, but you're at the lower level, but it gave us a good baseline of discipline. It gave us a good baseline of the Army and what the expectations were of junior officers that we would be facing as we came out of that program. But I agree. I think around our junior year is when, and I think there's some of that is by design of the program.
Yeah, could be.
Of how that is the year you shift into, you're in more leadership roles inside of the ROTC organization. And so therefore there's a little bit more work on your part.
Yeah.
And so you're like, to mention to the time that we spent together, a lot more time together. And I think when I look back at it kind of as a whole in those entire 4 years, I think that there was a culture built there inside of that ROTC program.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And while it did have subcomponents of that culture, I think throughout, high standards was something that really stands out to me of what the expectations were as we went through those 4 years.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really what came out of those second 2 years we were there, right? It was, we got the new leader in, and he had a special forces background, and yeah, it was a game on almost, right? Because those last years, that's really when it starts. And you were talking about land navigation earlier. So land navigation is a big part of the test to become an officer, and you you're given a map, you give them some coordinates, and there's supposed to be a point, with a number on it in each of these locations. You have to go and find it, and you get 5 hours. All right, here's the woods. Go out and find it. And we spent a lot of time at Tuskegee National Forest.
We did. And they never put these things in the forest like in the easy. It's never like in the nice sunny meadow.
Yeah,
It is always like down in some ravine, across some washed out creek bed.
Yeah.
Through the thickets and the brambles.
Yeah.
It's and there's 2 phases. There's a daytime option and there's a nighttime option.
Yeah, the night.
So you get to experience it both ways and without any lights.
So that's a land navigation, day and nighttime navigation is a test for cadets to become officers, right? You have to pass it. So most schools, I think, probably didn't do it as much as we did. Because I swear, it seems like every weekend there wasn't a home football game. We were out there in the Tuskegee National Forest trying to find these points. And so, one, yeah, that's us being forced to be together. So that's going to build a strong cohort. But it's also like the standard was you come back better than passing.
Yes.
Right? Like there was no...
all the points. You find them all. Yeah. And you get back within time.
So the national standard to pass is during the day you get 5 out of 8 points. Was it 3 out of 5 at night, right? No, like we were we all
8 and 5.
8, yeah, we got all 8 and we got all 5. That was a standard where we were, right? Not only that So that is what our leadership told to us, right? They said, you can pass at 5 of 8, but you're going to do better than that. And they, made sure we had the training and all the opportunity to do so.
Yeah.
But then we started holding each other accountable too, right? Like you come back with 8 during the day and you come back with 5 at night. And you come back well in time.
Yeah.
Like between us, like that's what we adopted because of the high standards from the leadership.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to that culture they were developing there, or maybe already had developed, but I think that's when we really started to feel that pressure, as we were the ones to carry that standard, and we were the ones that were looked at to maintain that culture of, you must not just pass, but you need to, success should not just be squeaking by.
Yes.
It should be very clear and evident. And I remember the conversations to get us to understand, why does it matter? Because I know somebody's sitting out there thinking, well, does it really matter? If you pass, you pass.
Yeah, you passed.
But as a leader, we as leaders are looked to for what is the standard of our organization. And leaders have higher expectations than everyone else in the organization. I mean, think about, what everybody thinks of their boss. You probably are expecting them to behave a little bit different than the new guy that just showed up last week. And so I think it was important for us to understand that, in our scenario, we were going to go be lieutenants, but I don't think that it matters that we were being prepared to be Army officers. I think that it is a leadership principle, and we were being set up for success to be a leader of an organization. And that organization was likely, especially in times of need, going to look to the leader to make decisions. And we've spoken about in the past, how many examples of leadership refer back to navigation. And usually it's like, when there's a stormy sea, how do you navigate difficult times as a leader, or something like that? But it goes back to something so simple as a map and a compass, and you alone and unafraid in the woods and trying to navigate through this. And how does that relate back to leadership? But I know you brought up about decisions.
Yeah.
And then being held accountable for those decisions. And not just to the cadre there, but Craig knew, if I show up with less than 8 and 5, I not only have to hear the feedback from the instructors, I know that I'm going to hear it from you too.
Like, that's
hey,
right.
What was the problem?
Well, I found 7, huh? Way to go, Craig.
Yeah.
Good job today. Yeah, because not only are you learning confidence and competence in your own abilities, right? Decision-making, accountability. So to get 5 out of 8, right? That's the expectation. That's the standard. You're passing. Congratulations. But as leaders, we want to be better than that, right? Because if we're asked to do the land navigation, right, we need to be comfortable and confident in that. Oh, only 5 out of 8? Okay, yeah, that's not a problem. We can do that. We are routinely getting 8 out of 8. So 5, not a problem. Yeah. Right?
And I think we've talked about in the past training and how you set up your training management and things like that. And I agree with you. It was, what I recall, if there was no home football game, we were in the forest somewhere. Yeah, we were in the woods running through. I mean, I remember that being a significant part of my 4 years.
Yes.
But that speaks to the repetitions that it needs, because the first time we went out there, we did not get 8 and 5.
Absolutely.
I don't remember what I got the first time I went out there, but I can be confident in telling you that we didn't all come back with 8 and 5.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it goes to, how did our cadre set us up for success? Is they gave us the training in the classroom. Yes. They gave us the skills to how to use a map, how to use a compass, but then they gave us enough time in those woods at night to learn from our mistakes, make our decisions, be held accountable afterwards, But it's not like you can just expect somebody to do something one time and become an expert.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of repetition sometimes, depending on the type of task and the complexity of it. And so I think back of, how did we become good at that particular skill set? Is we spent a lot of time, and we could tell that was a priority because our instructors knew that was a big piece of a lot of things we did. And it was not just that test. When we moved into things like the tactical exercises,
Yeah.
to maneuver, and during that exercise, you have to be able to navigate from one point to another. And so if you can't even navigate just by yourself in the daylight, you're not going to be able to do it on a nighttime patrol.
Yeah.
When you're now having to bring your squad of 9 individuals along for the ride.
Yeah, because you have to tell them where to go,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you have to convince them that you know where you're going.
Yeah. So it's a building block of how training progresses. And sometimes you got to spend more time on one piece of that chain than others.
Yeah.
But if you know that it's going to have second and third order effects down the road, it's worth it.
So I remember very specifically, like one of the big learning points of learning leadership, like sometimes you have those moments, right, where it's like it just clicks for you and realize something. Well, like so for ROTC, kind of like the leadership training exercise, situational tactical exercises, the sticks lanes, right, where you're responsible for leading a squad through some sort of tactical exercise, right? And so that's about 8 people, 8, 9 people. Well, so then the next level of that, which wasn't, I don't remember, I don't think it wasn't really graded at camp, right? The part where you actually take the test as a cadet. They did patrolling, which is really you're in charge of 2 squads. And so that was kind of the bonus at camp. Well, we trained sticks lanes, so being in charge of 8 people so much. But then we started training patrolling, right? We're in charge of 16 people so much. And I remember our leader, he came back to me and he came back to us. He said, "Hey, do you guys want to go back to the sticks lanes? We're in charge of 8 people." And all of us were like, no, patrolling is way more fun.
Yeah.
So that became,
we can take all our friends.
We take all our buddies. We're coming at you. And it's harder, right? It's more complex. It takes more skill. It's like just mentally and physically more demanding, but it became so much more fun than just doing a sticks lane. I mean, sticks lanes, by the time we were ready to go to camp, sticks lanes were child's play to us. So we got so far above the published standards because our leadership, directed us towards that sort of attitude that, I mean, we were passing without any problem at all.
And I think, because at that time, that was our, introduction to Army leadership. So this was, I think, for most of us, we had all, I shouldn't say all, but the majority of us had experienced some type of leadership training in high school, whether it be through athletics or civic organizations or something we had probably been a part of. But now these were all Army leaders that we were learning from. And so I think it was the level of teamwork that was emphasized was also important to them. So therefore we learned was, even if you have somebody on your team who is not meeting those standards, who is not excelling, you can't just say, well, I'm doing everything that I can do. That's a them problem.
Mm-hmm.
It's your responsibility, not even just as a leader, but if they're on your team, guess what? You're going to drag them along, kicking and screaming as it may be. But if they're on your team, you're responsible to take them with you. And I remember we were doing some joint training events where you'd have multiple schools there. And I was asked once I was in a leadership role on this tactical patrolling exercise. And from another school, one of the other leaders did not do as well as I did, but I was over that role. So I was a squad leader, had 2 team leaders. Team leader was not performing well. And even though I received very high marks on my evaluation, the critical feedback I got, not from the person actually evaluating the lane. One of our cadre who was just there observing came over to me and was like, "Hey, look, why did you let them do so poorly?" And I was thinking, well, that wasn't my job. That was their job. But I mean, I was a young college student. I was out there, I was trying to win, but it was explained to me, look, they're on your team. You're responsible. And this was a phrase that we heard a lot, is a leader's responsible for everything their unit does and fails to do. Well, guess what? If they're on your team and they're failing to do something, that's just as much on you.
Man.
And so it goes back to that idea of the teamwork and that standards high. And there's no ability as a leader to say, oh, well, they'll have to figure that out. No, it's your problem. You've got to go help. And maybe it's more training. Maybe it's setting the conditions for them, whatever it is. And this is not to, I don't want this to sound like, we were flawless or never had any. I mean, I've definitely failed some of those evaluations at some point, but we were expected to operate at this high level. And I think we met that intent. And retrospectively, I feel like that was a big piece of our leadership journey and our development and getting set up as young leaders who did not have any or had minimal formal training at that time.
Yeah. So I love that example, especially because part of it, I think, really sets up our leadership philosophy, so to speak. So, that leader, he came over to you, pulled you aside, talked to you individually, right?
Mm-hmm.
And explained that to you. That was a one-on-one interaction. He didn't have to stand up in front of the formation and preach that to everybody, right? He came to you as an authentic leader. It was a person-to-person conversation, right? This is a real conversation between two people, me trying to teach you something, right? So it's that very authenticity, right? So now when you heard that feedback, that leader took the time to go over to you, pull you aside individually and say, hey, listen, here's some corrections. Like, that time invested in you. I mean, here, 2 decades later, you still remember that.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
yeah.
So it's about, like I said, the leadership philosophy, it's authenticity, right? It is a real person up there having a real conversation, giving you real feedback. It's not General Patton, in front of the division waving an American flag.
Yeah.
Time and place for that, there is. But most of the time, that's probably not it. And if people can connect with you like that, and if they believe you're investing time in them just like that, I think that it goes a lot further. And I don't know that I ever saw that, that long ago that I understand that to be true. I don't think so. The reason why I really even realized it was because one of my lieutenants told me that. I was his commander, and after a while, a few years after we were in the same unit together, I was talking to him, and he pointed that out to me. He's like, because you're a one-on-one kind of person. You'd speak to people directly, authentically, and you're not General Patton in front of a division waving an American flag.
Yeah.
I guess so.
I think there's a lot of value there, because when you look at, like you said, there's a time and place for the pomp and circumstance of leadership. But I think when you look at it on a regular basis, what do you need more of? I think there's times and examples of when having a real conversation with somebody on your team in a one-on-one environment is a lot more appropriate than worrying about how are we going to do in this large formation or large gathering. How are we going to, worry about this big ceremony formation, when the reality is a lot of times that to set those high standards, to communicate and hold people accountable, it comes down to those authentic conversations.
Yeah.
And it's, as a young leader, especially, I think that was something kind of eye-opening to me, because I walk in there and I see all of these instructors who majority had been to combat and very highly accomplished inside of the Army. And for them to just come over to you and have a conversation And they didn't come over there and just immediately start yelling and making you do push-ups either. I think there's a misconception of that as how the military operates, because there was a desire to train you to be a thinker and a problem solver, not a robot.
Yeah.
And so I think that learning that it was not these individuals are just going to come and beat on their chest and make their big speech on stage in front of everybody standing in that position of attention. It was more about like, hey, come here, let's talk for a second. And having that conversation and communicating clearly, hey, this was the standard. You did or did not achieve it. This is how you get better, and keep doing this. And I think that was, one eye-opening to me as a young leader, not really knowing at that time what it was going to be like.
Yeah, man. So like just this whole combination of authentic leadership and having high standards and like the number of at-bats, right? And just allowing us to be taught, the standard, even the high standards they demanded. And then allowing us the time and space to figure it out, right? To work together, figure it out. Like the number of practices we had. And that grew within our cohort.
Yeah.
Right? We took that to ourselves. We were holding each other accountable to the high standard. Because we didn't want to let each other down. We didn't want to let the leadership down.
And I think that all of those actions really built the amount of trust we had inside of, that organization. And those that have done the in-person consulting with me have probably heard I talk about train, test, and trust. And there was the professor of military science had sent myself and one other cadet to mountain warfare school up in Vermont. During the school year, we came back, and the first time we had to set up the rappel tower, I remember he sent the two of us to go do it. Unsupervised, back at Auburn. Yeah. So unsupervised, two cadets setting up the rappel tower. And he came out and he's like, I'll come out and inspect it and make sure it's safe and everything. And he did. He came out but he showed that we had been trained. We had done rappel tower stuff there at Auburn before going up to Vermont. We had graduated, so we had been tested. We had graduated that Army school. And then we came back. He wanted to be the first one off the tower that we had set up. And to me, that was a demonstration of trust. And, it was one of those things as a leader, that was a very small thing. But to demonstrate that he trusted us to be able to complete those tasks, I think really, at the time, I may have not realized it, but then throughout the career to see that it's a cumulative effect of those small actions go a long way in building trust inside of an organization.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if we figured out why we are the way we are, but we dissected it some. Yeah. And hopefully, that's helpful. I think, just like it was high standards and authenticity and practice, right? And continuing to, support each other and get support from the leadership and hold each other accountable. I think that it grew within us because of the way that our leaders taught us, directed us, coached us, right? I think that's all what did it for us, I guess.
Yeah, and we just wanted to, kind of share a glimpse of back some of the very early beginnings of this. This wasn't we didn't learn all of this stuff while in combat and while as an officer in the Army. Some of this learning took place when we were, 19, 20, 21-year-old college students. And this is a journey. We just wanted to kind of share that so that as we share these experiences, hopefully y'all can gain some value from what we have seen and tried and what works or does not. All right, we appreciate y'all, and we will see y'all next time.
As always, take these lessons, use them, and spread them. Everyone is welcome in the cohort.
Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe for more, and drop us a line at commandpostcohort.com to request a specific topic.
We'll see you next time on the cohort.